Hi and welcome to the Jon Gaunt Show. I'm delighted that this afternoon I'm going to do one of my long-form interviews, and this time it's the ex-UKIP MEP Stephen Woolfe, and of course he's an expert on things like immigration and economics. So we're going to have a good old chat. We're going to talk about Brexit. We're going to talk about this ridiculous idea by Boris Johnson today of an amnesty for illegal immigrants. We're going to talk about freedom of movement. We're going to talk about Salisbury. We're going to talk about Syria, the white helmets. We're going to talk about Donald Trump. And at the end, we're going to say, where now for those of us who are to the right in politics? All coming up with me, Jon Gaunt, and of course Stephen Woolfe. We still need you to donate, and if you want this to happen and this alternative voice to happen, get yourself along to www.jongaunt.com and donate as much as you can to expand the podcasts and the interviews that we can do. You're not under an obligation. We're not putting it behind a paywall, but let's face it, now more than ever, we need the voice of the alternative when you consider the lies, the BS we're being told by the MSM. And I guess that ties in nicely with the first thing I want to talk about with Mr. Woolfe today, which, of course, is little Alfie. Now, good afternoon, Stephen Woolfe.
Good afternoon, John, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's great to have you on. Steve, I know you've been working tirelessly on the Alfie case. Give us the background to it, where we are now, and why you are involved.
Okay, John, what this is a very important story about a very ill little boy, Alfie Evans, who has been on life support machine at Alderhay Hospital for well over a year and a half, and he went in suffering from convulsions, and the hospital took care of him, looked after him, but was not able to find a diagnosis. What they did say is that he had a degenerative brain disease, and that's how the story kind of moved on. And after a while, he's on this high medication, particularly certain drugs to stop him fitting, but also had an impact on the way that he was really breathing. And his dad and his family started to get a little bit worried, and particularly when they started to hear that the hospital said, there's nothing more that we can do. We think it's time to switch the life machine off, i.e. it's time for us to kill the child because we can't diagnose him. We believe his brain is made of water, and that's our decision.
But hang on, let me just stop you there for a moment. He didn't go in really ill then. Is that what you're saying, or have I misheard that?
He went in with some mysterious, consistent convulsions and fits, and people were trying to work out what was actually causing this. And of course, other complications over time come along.
Sure.
But the key point is...
You said they want to kill him. They want to turn the machine off. That's very strong, emotive language. Explain to me why you've come to that conclusion and why you chose those words.
My conclusion is that there are alternatives for Alfie Evans, rather than just remaining in Alderhay Hospital and having them terminate his life through a court-permitted judgment, which uses lovely phrases called withdrawal of life. Let's be clear about this. Withdrawal of life means killing a child because you're no longer going to treat that child. It's as though that child is disposable in my way, and no child should be disposable. And I've come to that conclusion because they are determined. They've used the court system all along the way to prevent Thomas and his family being able to take Alfie Evans abroad to Italy. Not to some imaginary hospital that is made up as though it's just a bunch of idiots making up how they treat a child, but to the Bambino Hospital in Rome, a very well-recognized international hospital, a Rome in which the Pope has backed, a hospital in which many people from Italy have backed. But we also had offers of help from Milan and in Germany. And I'll tell you one other story that's not been in the press, John. We a couple of weeks ago, we even managed to fly a group of Polish doctors into Speke Airport in Liverpool, leaving an air ambulance on the airstrip, got an ambulance waiting for Alfie. After a court hearing we'd had in London, those doctors were willing to take him immediately to Italy in that air ambulance. And what did the hospital do? They locked those 4 doctors in a room. They called the police. They said that we were the ward of court of this doctor, which at the time was not true. and then they sought an injunction to prevent him being taken away.
Let me just ask you a supplementary question there then. Do you believe it's fundamentally the rights of any parent to make the decision about a child's life and death, and it's not the ultimate right of doctors? Is that where you're coming from?
I believe that parents have the ultimate right to look after their children, take care of them, and ultimately make those decisions. In serious situations like this, of course, they have to listen to what the doctors have to say. And the vast majority of cases, I think everybody understands that the doctor's experience and skills will say their child may not be able to sustain life anymore. But consent is not unilateral in this situation. Where we have a situation like this is there are alternatives, John. Many alternatives. But take a look back at where we're going in our country. This is not just about Alfie Evans.
No.
It's about Charlie Gard, where there are offers of help in America.
Sure.
It is about Aisha King, who they said had a terminal cancer. So they had to withdraw treatment.
Yeah.
They couldn't. The treatment that he was being offered, I think in Spain or Italy at the time, was not going to work on him. And what's happened? His dad took him out. A European arrest warrant was issued on him. But that child now, Aisha King, is alive and well.
So, what do you want, or what did you want? Because as I understand it, the situation at the moment is the life support machine has effectively been turned off. Alfie will die eventually, maybe in the next day or two. Now his dad's asking just to take him at home at least. What are you asking for at this moment, and what do you think should be happening, Stephen Woolfe?
Okay, I had a court hearing today at 2 p.m. and the courts will be asked one final time to allow Alfie to get on that plane and go to Italy and allow them to at least treat him, and if not, have their palliative care take care of him. And if that fails, we'd like him to be able to go home to the family home where there is an ability to look after him, but at least he should be there amongst his family and friends who have fought with dignity, with strength, with courage. And if there's ever a man that you have to meet, it is Thomas Evans and his family. But Thomas, who's fought what I believe is a courageous and strong and amazing fight from that man. I've been inspired by him. I've been energized by the way that he has brought this case to matter, and we work and talk about this all the time. Without his energy, I don't think the world would have known this case, because I believe that the hospital wanted to brush it under the carpet like so many others do.
Some people, though, have criticised the supporters. I mean, there was a kind of invasion of the hospital. Do you condone that kind of behaviour? Or is that coming from the fact, we're talking about a baby? I mean, as you know, I'm a dad of two as well. And I know it's a cliche, but I would give my life if it saved my children. You're probably the same, Stephen. So I understand the emotion, but there's been an awful lot of emotion. Some of it, has it overstepped the mark? I don't know. What do you reckon?
Absolutely not. You see, this is how some call it the deep state, some call it the overstate, but this is how the elites try to undermine, diminish those people who they see are beneath them. They have called them a mob. They're not a mob, John. They are a bunch of concerned people who want to do right by Alfie and their family by letting them go out. And they've been ignored. No one listened to them. Not a single MP helped Alfie Evans. There's no other politicians helped them. And it's only by chance 7 weeks ago, after a desperate call they made to my office, did we even become aware of this. Because it wasn't even being covered in the mainstream media. It was being brushed under the carpet. But they will demonize these people. They will say they're trying to rush the hospital. They put over 9 or 10 policemen on the door. There was more riot police there than was at the football ground with Roma last week. I mean, what are we talking about? Family people like you who would die for their child to give them their last bit of life. And the callousness, the heartlessness, the cruelty of those people, I believe, in charge. That's my view. Of course, they'll say something else. We're looking after the best interests of the child. That child is suffering. Well, if he's suffering, why are you not giving him food now? Why are you removing his air? Why are you not giving him water? These are the things that matter. And why are you not allowing this family to have another chance, another opportunity where you have respected medical opinions in other countries willing to give them that chance? What harm is it to you? The only harm is it's beating your ego. You believe that you are best. There's institutional arrogance at the core of this.
Okay, Stephen, thank you for that. We'll move on to other subjects, but if you want to comment on that, send me an email, john@jongaunt.com. I don't think I've ever heard such a passionate, intelligent defence of what these parents are doing. I was kind of on the fence on this one, but I think I know where I firmly am now. Stephen, thank you for that. Let's move on if we can, and it does seem a bit tenuous, this. But I don't think it is, because you talk about the mob. And I guess that ties me into Brexit and the fact that it appears that we are going to be betrayed over Brexit. Looks like we're going to stay in the customs union, and looks like we're going to have freedom of movement. And now add into that mix, you've even got Boris Johnson, who led part of the Leave campaign, suggesting an amnesty for illegal immigrants. Now, that is not what the British people want. But let's start with the betrayal. Do you think we're being betrayed? Do you think Theresa May, in the end, Stephen Woolfe MEP, is going to leave us in that customs union in a worse possible position than when we were fully in the EU? Over to you.
I think we are being betrayed over the original arguments that we put forward in Brexit. Let's be clear and summarise what they were, John. We wanted to take control of our borders. There's no control of our borders if you're giving EU citizens advantageous visas to those across the rest of the world, and we're making no changes in the numbers that are coming through. We wanted to take control of our money. Well, okay, there might be some kind of civil service scam in which they, on the face of it, we're not handing over 10 billion a year, but we already know that we're paying into various institutions till 2060. We wanted to take control of our laws, but it's absolutely clear from the House of Lords that they're trying to keep us in the European system and the European courts of justice, and also in other human rights aspects of the European Union as well. We wanted to take control of our trade. And how can you take control of your trade if we're being held in the customs union, or, again, using one of those lovely civil service scam words that they have, a form of customs union, whereby we follow the EU's rules in absolutely everything. The only thing that we won't be in is the European Parliament, or have a single commissioner, or maybe having a judge on the European Courts of Justice. But in every other aspect, we're effectively remaining in the European Union as a vassal state.
Let me ask you a question. Your former leader, Nigel Farage, he said it was a joke at first, but more and more it looks like it could be a genuine call for a second referendum. Because my feeling, and I think Farage's feeling, is if there was a second referendum, the majority would be even bigger. Is that where you are?
No, I don't think we should give the dignity to those on the Remainers' side to undermine those people who voted in their millions to actually leave the European Union. I think even by arguing that we go into a second referendum, which again, I do believe we probably win, but I'll come to reasons why I think it's unnecessary. What we are doing is dignifying those who want to undermine democracy. And why do I say that? Okay, we hear these arguments all the time. A democracy is about putting a particular case to the people hearing the arguments very clearly, and they very clearly heard everybody say we wanted to leave the single market, the customs union, and have a free trade arrangement. We wanted our borders taken back. We weren't going to be under the control of the ECJ. We were going to have our money back. And then what a country should do is implement that decision. Now, I don't care how difficult that decision is or how difficult it is to implement it. And you can still oppose the idea of implementing it. But until it's actually been implemented, that vote has not actually mattered at all.
No.
And if you try to have a second referendum before the implementation, that to me is the reverse of democracy, and it makes a joke of it. And therefore, in the future, there's a very keen argument, you've no point in bothering voting ever again at all.
So what do you make of Lord Adonis, Nick Clegg, Tony Blair? I mean, what are they up to? Are they deluded? Are they mad? Or are they dangerous?
I think it's that latter word, John. I think they are dangerously anti-democratic. There is one thing that if you've got to recall, that I link in to what we're just saying about Alfie Evans.
Yeah.
And that is, there is an institutional arrogance, I believe, at the top of hospitals and even the court system about how they know best.
Yeah.
But the political elites, working along some of those who are in the financial and corporatist elites, equally believe they are the supreme beings. They are the people with the greatest brains, the greatest knowledge, which is why they began by calling us thick, stupid, idiotic, too old to be able to contemplate, driving divisions between mums and children, grandparents and grandchildren. The same sort of arrogant attitude that was held by the loser of the American election in Hillary Clinton by calling people deplorables.
Good point.
And this isn't something that just disappears. These people are so overly confident that they know what's best, that they do whatever they need to undermine those people who have stuck a proverbial democratic finger up towards of them and said, no, we're sick and tired of having crumbs off the table. It's about time. We want the whole loaf, the bread, the jam, and we want to have the sandwich too.
But do you think that sandwich is being withheld deliberately then by people like Theresa May? I mean, David Cameron said it's a once in a lifetime and I will pull the lever the day after the result. It never happened. Is it some kind of plan? Is it, or is she just incompetent? I mean, what do you make of the way she's playing it?
Well, I think she was a Remainer, but she was persuaded of the arguments by her two chief of staff, Fiona Hill and Nick, and I'm going to forget his surname.
Nick Timothy.
Yeah. And they played an important part in her judgment in believing that they had to carry out Brexit afterwards.
They're both gone now.
Why do you think it was so important to remove them and put her new chief of staff in as an Uber Remainer and all of those around her, including Ollie Robbins, as Uber Remainers? And I think what you've got is a coterie of anti-democratic, pro-European Heseltine and Clark lovies surrounding her, along with a whole load of civil servants who have grown up in a culture saying, where is my best career? It's on the EU track. It's not in the Africa track.
Choo, get on the EU gravy train. Yeah, go on.
That's right. We want the EU gravy train. I want to be that commissioner. I want to be the person who travels between London and Europe all the time, getting the benefits. I see them as our best option. And they are the ones who are making it incredibly difficult. And what I see is potentially two routes, John. First of all, on the one side, they will say, look, it's so complicated and difficult to get the border with Ireland, to be able to work out how we pay our VAT, that in essence, you force Parliament into a vote of no confidence into Theresa May, which she wins because the Conservative Party won't vote for a general election, which they think they could lose to the Labour Party. And so ultimately, we're in the customs union. Or they make it so difficult that you have to force out some of the Leaver MPs, whether it's Rees-Mogg or Boris Johnson, and they then force the hand into a leadership election, which the Remainers then will replace them with their next lackey, who is a supporter of the EU. And again, they say we've got to stay in the customs union. And I think they've managed to work it in such a way that they win on both sides without actually having to go to a second referendum.
Let me get this right then. You think we might leave, but in an okey-cokey kind of way. We're in, but we're not in, out, shake it all about. But we're not going to get what you're telling me now. We're not going to get what we thought we voted for on that glorious day. Is that the conclusion you've come to?
My conclusion is that regulatory divergence, which is an essential element of free trade and the ability to grow, will be non-existent. I believe that our borders will still be uncontrolled, but we'll say that it's ours, but we'll pass it through legislation to effectively have the same thing. I think that we'll join up with so many different areas that we're actually paying the money, but we'll do so without a voice in the European Parliament, and we won't have a vote.
So do you look back now and think, I wish we hadn't even bothered?
No, absolutely not. Oh, no, John, to not bother and to fight for something that we believe was absolutely right would be a travesty of the history of our nation, a nation that's had to deal with those people who've betrayed us before. I mean, I made a recent speech about the English king in 646 who was betrayed by his brother-in-law to the Danish. who attacked in the north and they killed our last English king.
Sure.
We had the same in Harold in 1066, where family members betrayed him to William, so that the French were able to conquer us for 300 years. Blair, Adonis, Clegg are only of the same ilk of people that see Europe as a much more important controller of us than our own nation and our own people.
Fully understand that. So where's Gove and where's Boris? Have they sold us down the river? And indeed David Davis, who looks increasingly tired, as if all he wants is to get to the end bit, because he has said he's going to retire once the Brexit negotiation are over. So where are those three in all of this?
I'm going to give you a way that the civil service and an organisation like the European Union and the UK work. I have had nothing but trouble in the way that I try and pay my staff.
Yeah.
Have events that have been organised according to the rules in the European Parliament denied, so that I have to pay them myself, and then we have to appeal, and then eventually say, oh, yes, you were right, but it takes you 3, 4, 5, 6 months. They will, because I'm a Brexiteer, put every obstacle in the way of something that is true and right, and eventually they will agree it. But they have dragged you through the mire so that you feel exhausted and tired.
Well, I think let me just interrupt you there. I actually think that's what's happening totally. I think they're trying to exhaust the British people. You know, you talk to people now about Brexit, they go, oh, shut up, Gaunty. You know, everyone's just fed up. But when you push them and you say, how would you vote again? They say, I'd still vote out. But they are exhausting us, aren't they? They've exhausted the media now. The media hardly want to report this in a fair way. I mean, obviously, the biased BBC will always be the propaganda arm of Brussels and Strasbourg. But essentially, they've exhausted us. They've knackered us with it all.
And that's exactly part of their overall plan. Why do you think civil servants sit there never building their own businesses? Why do you never think they go and launch their own things? Why do you think they try to get to Oxford and Cambridge or the Sorbonne or Yale and Harvard? Because they know that ultimately they get in there. They don't have to ever make a decision. They don't have to go to the polls. They don't ever have to be voted. All they do is sit at the back doing what they think is best, tiring everybody out. And hopefully everybody leaves, but they're still going 20, 30 years after every politician has lost and disappeared. One or two of them might eventually go on to sit onto the board of a company. Others sit there trying to get their jobs in the House of the Lords or sitting in the university hierarchy or in the head of a nice orchestra in London where they can enjoy themselves. That's what they know their plan is. They don't like us achieving our plans. And that is why they're exhausting us, and they've got every mechanism over hundreds of years of skills of being able to do that.
It's a bit like Billy Connolly says. I'm misquoting him slightly. He says there's no point in voting because whoever you vote for, the government get back in, and by that I think he means the civil servant. Let's move on to Boris, because there is breaking news this morning in the Daily Telegraph. He's calling for an amnesty for illegal immigrants. Now this goes back to the Windrush controversy, which I'm sure you agree with me. Tell me, what's a bloody cock-up to treat our Commonwealth cousins, British citizens, in this filthy, and I'm going to say it, racist way? Not just May's government, but it would appear Cameron, and it would appear Labour as well. What do you make of Windrush? And is the answer now an amnesty for illegal immigrants? I say no, because these people are not illegal, and we've suddenly turned and changed the agenda again, and Corbyn started this by mixing up illegal and legal immigrants. I know you are the stock of immigrants. I mean, I believe in well-controlled, managed immigration, but I do not want an immigrants are us policy, and I certainly don't want people who jump out the back of a bloody lorry at a service station to somehow be given an amnesty. Stephen Woolfe.
The British people are not a racist nation. The British people do not hate immigrants or immigration.
Well said.
It was absolutely clear from the referendum that what we wanted to do was take back control of our borders so that any immigration policy treated everybody in the world equally, but we also looked after the people in our own country. And that is why when you looked at the debates over immigration, you had people from the BAME community massively supporting the idea that immigration can be good, but it also needs to be managed and controlled. And so the Windrush issue from Labour and the Tories is indeed a stupidly racist aspect of making immigration policy. It is a pathetic way of dealing with people who we invited into our country after the Second World War. And now we're saying we've lost their documents after 60 years and they've got to find them in order to be able to stay.
Yep.
But what is also abysmal are those on the Open Door Migrationist support team who are now using this as an idea that you can keep the borders open for everyone everywhere. We're too small a country, too overpopulated to be able to contemplate that. And it also confuses the message of people by saying that we're all racist. Deal with the Windrush, give them the ability to stay here because they can prove it, but do not at all open the doors to a policy of open door migration and allowing amnesties. And when I think of Boris Johnson on this, John, I think of that 101 limericks from Spike Milligan, A Man Out of Space. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah, go on, tell us.
It goes, a man from outer space said, I'm from a superior race. You're all inferior while I'm superior. Then he tripped and fell flat on his face. Well, I tell you, Boris Johnson is...
Go on.
Boris Johnson is falling flat on his face on this issue, isn't he?
Well,
he's trying to, if he's trying to prime himself to be the new leader of the Conservative Party as an attack from those on the Brexiteers to say we want to get Theresa May, but I need to be friendly on immigration to approach those people who don't normally vote for the Conservatives. Yeah. Not only has he misunderstood the country, he's misunderstood the BAME community as well, and he's misunderstood this issue of Windrush. Opening the doors to everybody, every Tom, Dick and Harry who's an illegal immigrant, is also opposed by those who took the time and the care to apply legally to come to this country.
Well, you're echoing really the words of the MP Nadeem Sawari, who's on the front bench of the Conservatives as well. He told BBC Radio 4's Today programme, the question assumes illegal immigrants should have the same status of people who are here legally, whether they are of immigrant stock or are British born and bred. I think that's a wrong assumption, because actually most of your listeners, including immigrants like myself and my parents and other immigrants, will think if you're here illegally and working illegally, then you really shouldn't be here. He's the MP for Stratford, just down the road from where I am in Warwick. He's bang on the money, isn't he, Stephen?
Well, absolutely. And poll after poll says to people that they want people to apply to legally come to the United Kingdom. Now, when they come here, they want them to work. They don't want to do criminal activities. They don't want them to be defrauding benefits. They want to be able to contribute to society. And what we're saying is we've had a huge number of people over the past 10 to 15 years that has pushed pressure on our roads and our schools and our hospitals, increased the prices of rents and housing. And we're simply asking for a period of time to reduce the number of immigration and allow integration of those who are already here in a much more successful way. And by doing so, we will also then have a much fairer and equal country. And Brexit was enabled as one stage to do it. It wasn't the total answer. I always argued it wasn't the total answer. You needed to have a politician in charge of immigration who understood the laws and be able to be capable of drafting legislation that treated people in a fair, ethical and forward-thinking way. They haven't got that now.
Okay. Well, you're listening to Stephen Woolfe and his views, the independent MEP, used to be a member of UKIP. We're having a fascinating conversation. We're going to move on quickly to Trump, and we're going to move on to Salisbury and Syria. And if we've got time, I want to have a quick chat about Corbyn as well. This is the Jon Gaunt podcast. As you know, I do my daily podcasts, and now I'm interspersing them with these long-form interviews with leading figures, often figures who don't get enough attention or space on the mainstream media, and we know why, because of the kind of things they say. So this is the second one in this series. We had Raheem look back and find out that one on jongaunt.com. And if you do go to jongaunt.com, please, if you can, just make a little donation so we can keep these podcasts going and the voice of the alternative on air. Let's move on very quickly, if we can, to Syria and Salisbury. How much of that was diversion, and do you believe there was a chemical attack in Syria, or are you suspicious, Stephen Woolfe, of the white helmets? Because I am.
And I'll tell you what I did at first, John, is I didn't make any comments on the issue in Salisbury and the issue in Syria.
Well, that's sensible, and that's what our Prime Minister, and going back to Johnson, should have done as well. But go on, carry on.
And the main reason why is because Anybody who's observed what's been happening in the Middle East from the times that we decided to invade Iraq and then the decisions to go to illegally for war in Afghanistan, and then watch in the civil war that was created in Syria, and know that it was also related to the overthrow of an elected government in Ukraine, to what was happening across Egypt, all down there. All of this is absolutely related, and it's about a great power struggle between the United States, its allies in the UK, France, and EU, their friends in Saudi Arabia, who are opposing the kind of growing powers of China, Russia, Iran, India, and the links that they have made to countries through Africa and across the globe. And so for me, anyone who's observed that Syria was partly funded and supported as an overthrow of a person that was in control of a regime that no one would say was pleasant or nice, but at the end of the day has been able to keep the Christian community relatively safe up there, which they're not safe now with ISIS killing so many of them and wiping out their communities, is that it was part of a bigger game. And so I've had an open mind. And one of the reasons why I kept an open mind is because of what we saw in the war in Iraq. We know it was illegal. And all the information from the experts in that time has now been proven to be incorrect. And so I looked at some of the evidence in Syria. What we had is these white helmets that suggested that this bomb came in, everyone was covered in this chemical, and it was a chemical attack. But no one's been able to keep any of the bodies or find them where they are. These people who've made these allegations have all disappeared. But then we have 2 points. No one's allowing in the international chemical agencies to go and observe what happens in there. And over the past few weeks, we've had well-respected journalists, some of them who I don't necessarily agree with.
I was just saying, Robert Fisk. Well, I mean, he says there was no attack. He went and spoken to them. Now, he's no great friend of mine. He's a very much a left-wing journalist, but he's been in there and said this. He's seen it.
But he's not only a journalist that is respected, he's won international awards after international award. The American journalists that have gone in with him are people who've won international awards after international awards for people who check in the old way that the mainstream media used to do. And then what throws it in for me is when you see Sky News parroting what the government say about people on the Twitter being Russian bots. You know, people who, like Peter Hitchens, who felt threatened for expressing a view that was contrary to the government's view over Salisbury. And it's when you start adding those little pieces together that the university lecturers that made comments that this chemical attack couldn't possibly have been this way, or if the door handle had lots of chemicals on it, then lots of people in the area would have keeled over, and why was that policeman still standing next to it right after the chemical attack on those 2 people for Russia? Why is he still alive and not foaming at the mouth? It's the circumstantial evidence in a number of areas added together that has kept me out from feeling that this attack actually happened, or if it did, it was undertaken by those in the regimes, and that this is part...
Hang on a minute, let me stop there. I've just got to clarify that. You're saying that about the Skripals in Salisbury and the Syria?
No, I'm less certain about the Skripal case. Because I still think that there is an argument that somebody certainly did try to assassinate these people.
But whether that goes straight to Putin's a different question, isn't it? Surely.
Yeah, and that is my point.
But what you're talking about, the bombing of Syria, then, my view is Syria, it should not have happened. They should not have gone in, May and Trump. Is that where you are?
I'm of the view we should not have gone in at all. And I think one of the main reasons that comes to mind is this. It seems to me that the Syrian government were winning this war, and this was another area that they were taking control. And why would he bring down the wrath of the world upon him when he's just about to take control of an area just outside of Damascus and free a whole bunch of Christians as well as Muslim communities there who openly welcome him? Not with the open arms that all of us might think, because at the end of the day, they too know that he's not been a brilliant friend to them in the past either. but enough to know that they didn't want to be living under the kind of leadership and control of ISIS beheadists.
So if Trump made a mistake there, and I'm with you 100% and shouldn't have done that, what do you make of his handling of North Korea? Everyone told us he was going to end up in World War III. He's played a bloody blinder, hasn't he, so far?
Well, this is the kind of strange thing about Trump, isn't it? On the one hand, he can do something so successful as that, and that's upon the advice of people in his, I suppose his inner circle who are there. But that same inner circle are the ones advising him about Syria. And I think what you've got very clearly about Syria is they were losing the war in the north of Syria.
Yeah.
Where they're not losing the war in terms of North Korea. I mean, actually, North Korea is a lot worse off. It doesn't have that many allies, whereas Syria has Russia and also Iran to help it, along with Hezbollah. Whereas there's no one other than the Chinese, but the Chinese are also in a huge negotiation war over trade with America, and they don't want to lose out too much either. So they would have to fold, and I think he's played a blinder in making them fold. But publicly, what is actually happening behind the scenes? What's very strange about Trump is how many people has he actually fired? He doesn't seem to have... all the original people that backed him, worked with him,
have gone.
Hardly any of them seem to be there anymore. So who's he replaced them with? And is a lot of the policies that we thought he was going to work out actually being achieved? I've not seen the wall being built up. I don't see the full revision of the Obama healthcare. He's thought, he thought over immigration. He's managed to achieve some points. The only thing that he's really managed to successfully do is get the big tax issues sorted out. And he's benefiting from that. Is it the new people that are involved and not those who originally voted for him?
I think they're good points. Now, just before we go, very quickly, let's talk about Corbyn. Then let's talk about the future for the right and for an independent Britain. So very quickly, Jeremy Corbyn, completely engulfed in this anti-Semitism row. Where are you on this one?
Well, if this was the time that I was living and working in UKIP, then every newspaper in the land would have been pillaring us, as they did, for a councillor that said that it was gay people's fault that there was a flood. But here we know that we have a whole party that has got hundreds, if not thousands, of its supporters edging on either full on anti-Semitism or not even understanding that some of those things are anti-Semitic. But we don't see Hope Not Hate campaigning against them in the May election. We don't see any of their donors pulling away. We don't see the press putting every single name and face and the members of their family on the front pages, chasing them down the streets, calling them racists. I don't see the same people of Black Vote coming out saying, let's not vote for the Labour Party. No, there's a double standards here. But the only reason they're attacking Corbyn on this and seeing it as his weak point, in my view, is because he is holding up the Brexit vote of the left.
Yeah.
And I think that the reason they're attacking him is to remove him, to put their own Remainer in the same way they did with Tony Benn and his team at the time.
Interesting.
And I think whilst he's wrong not to get a grip of anti-Semitism in his party, I think the reason that they're doing so is to remove him to help on the whole Remainer campaign.
That's a fascinating insight. I'm going to let you go now. Just one 60-second soundbite. What's the future for those of us on the right? Because I'm fed up of being called far right, and I'm also fed up of, suddenly having to realise that, right, to be right is to be wrong. So where's the future? Where's the hope?
We've got a difficult fight, and somehow we need to find a way of regrouping because we're under enormous pressure from all sides, including the so-called Conservative Party, which we know is no longer conservative. Yeah. The social democratic left-wing ideology has infiltrated schools to hospitals to the legal profession. Those who believe in family values, small c conservatism, low taxation, the government staying out of our lives, we're becoming an endangered species, and we haven't got a brave character in the leading politics to take us forward or capable enough of doing so. Somehow we need to find a way of fighting back and coming together.
Stephen, thank you very much indeed. You've been listening to the views of Stephen Woolfe. This is the Jon Gaunt podcast. If you can help us out, get to www.jongaunt.com and keep spreading the word. We are not going to be defeated. We will not be ignored. There is a need, when we live under a controlled mainstream media, as we've been illustrating in this interview today, for alternative voices to be heard, and they will be on the Jon Gaunt podcast. Thank you very much.
We will make America great again.